Welcome back to another edition of the Night Report podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike Broadbent. Joining me is my co-host, Richie Schneiderite. Richie, we have a bit of a loaded show today. We're going to talk some football opening week of spring practice. We have a transfer portal visitor for football coming this weekend. And later in the show, we're going to be joined by Rutgers basketball insider Richard Kent again. He enjoyed his time with us so much. He wanted to come on again, and he's got some really good nuggets to share. About everything Rutgers basketball related, from scheduling to coaching rumors to portal rumors. So a lot to come later in the show. But first, let's talk Rutgers football. I know you can't really say a whole lot, but spring practice opened on Tuesday, I believe.
Yes.
And so Rutgers head coach Greg Schiano spoke to the media, and I think there's additional coaches and players speaking today. So what have you seen and heard so far out of spring practice?
It's tough to gauge just about anything. Spider pads are boring, and you can't really tackle anyone, and that's really it we got there. They didn't really say much. He was asked about Gavin Wimsatt's development, and he did speak pretty highly of him. I don't know if I'd read too much into it. I know everyone's like, oh my God, he anointed him starter. And it's like, no, go back to the video and listen to the question. Like, he did not. Someone specifically asked about Gavin, and he kind of just said, like, Gavin's looking really well. He's doing solid. He also said on the injury front, like, guys like Sam Brown obviously going to be held out. But he did mention Moses Walker and Mohamed Toure are both full goes. Moses is coming off an ACL injury, so he's back. That's nice to see. He looks ripped and just as good as ever. I thought he would have been a starter last year, honestly, if he wasn't hurt. Mohamed Toure kind of slimmed down / a little bit, but gained more muscle. He's going to be playing between a hybrid role between linebacker and edge. I originally thought it would go full edge, just because he was your leading sack guy for 2 seasons in a row, right? I believe. Yep. Not including last year, obviously, because of injury, but I think he's going to play 60-40 more linebacker. Now, we'll see if that works out or not. In terms of coverage-wise, I know he has that one interception, in the 2021 season where he was in coverage. So maybe he could be a good linebacker. Maybe they revert back to a 4-3. It's still, a lot is still to be determined. Totally new offensive coaching staff, totally new techniques and teaching styles and all that. We'll just have to kind of wait and see what happens. It's been one practice so far, so it's really hard to say much. And like I said, they're not tackling. There's no pads. It's just technique and training and drills.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember the last time Rutgers had a trio of edge rushers better than Aaron Lewis, Wes Bailey, and Mo Toure, though. So the defensive line, regardless of where you play Mo Toure, he's going to be rushing the passer a good amount. So that's 100%. A dangerous trio along the defensive front. In terms of, there's obviously a lot of early enrollees in terms of freshmen and, redshirt freshmen who have been in the program now for a full year and their bodies have been totally transformed. Does anybody stand out to you that you've seen in terms of like what they look like physically?
I mean, Keontae Hamilton's the obvious one. He gained 15, 20 pounds. I know it's technically, I think it says 15 pounds gained, but he definitely gained more than that, it looks like. He's bulkier. He's bigger. If you look on our Instagram or our Twitter, we posted a photo of him, and might be even able to pull that up actually. He just looks like he's got significant weight now. We'll see how he is on the interior. He's going to have a different guy next to him in spring than he'll probably have in summer and fall, because Isaiah Aiton out of Ole Miss is not on campus yet.
Yep.
But I think as long as he can kind of get back to his freshman year self, they should have a pretty good overall team, especially the defensive line, because like you mentioned, there's a ton of edge rushers. If Hamilton can get into his own that should open up the entire interior. It's just a matter of Aiton or Hamilton just getting through and making that pass rush. So I think they'll have a good defense again. I'm very confident in that. I don't know how good, because that's not, let's be honest, like Ifan Maije wasn't putting up crazy numbers, but he was still a very good defensive tackle and a run stuffer. And I think they're going to miss him a little bit. I think that's going to hurt losing him, but you get another year of experience for the edge, another year of linebackers, healthy DBs. It's still to be determined. I know you did lose a pretty good one in Christian Braswell. You lost a really good one in Christian Izzian. So
yep.
it's going to be hard to replace those guys, but Michael Dixon's going to fill in pretty nicely in that hybrid safety linebacker role. And then it's to be determined if Eric Rogers and Amonkwa can kind of fill in the loss of Braswell. I think Braswell was a great player. I wouldn't be shocked if he turns into like a Trey Avery type situation.
I feel the exact same way. He was kind of snake bitten by injuries, but his last year at Temple, he was just a great. He just had an eye for the ball. He was just always making plays, whether it be interceptions, pass breakups, great defense, forcing incompletions. And last year he was really, really good for Rutgers. He obviously didn't play a ton early on as they kind of eased him back in, but by the end of the season, he was probably, if not our best player in the secondary, one of our best players in the secondary. And obviously we reloaded a lot this year on defense. If we just talk about guys coming in to the defense versus going out, we made a pretty big upgrade, in my opinion. So coming in, you've got Mo Toure coming back from an injury. You got Moses Walker coming back from an injury. You got Flip Dixon, which Michael Dixon's nickname is Flip. You're probably going to hear the program called Flip. Schiano's already calling him Flip. So that's his nickname. Eric Rogers obviously was a standout in Northern Illinois. And you have Charles Amonkwa, which is Thomas Amonkwa's older brother, coming in from Akron, I believe. Yeah. So I feel like that's a sizable upgrade overall, assuming Max Melton can make a leap too.
That's the big one that I'm really indifferent on, just because he had such a bad junior or whatever you want to call it, fourth year senior campaign. He struggled last year. Like it wasn't pretty for him as cornerback one. Now can he step up and develop into that CD1? I actually thought he was the best player on the team going into the season last year. It's going to come down to game day. Like, we could watch him all we want, and he looks great in practice, but it comes down to when the ball is snapped, can he be CB1, and can he lock down a guy man-on-man coverage? So still to be determined there, and we'll kind of wait and see. And if he can't, then you have other options, but it's I don't know if anyone can step or have the ceiling that Max does.
Yeah, I think the single biggest improvement, though, will be our linebackers. Like last year, we had to play Dream Powell and we had to play Deion Jennings almost 100% of the snaps because we ran with two linebackers as our base defense, and those guys just never got a break. And Moses Walker is easily our most physically talented linebacker. Now, he's still a young kid. He's a redshirt freshman, so it's going to be determined whether or not he makes a huge impact this year. But I mean, I think he's just oozing with potential, and I could easily see him being the best player on the defense by the end of the year. That is ceiling.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me. I'm intrigued to see what they do now, because now you can kind of go back to that 4-3 defense that you have been running forever. And then I guess the past two seasons it was just 5-2 or 2. What am I saying? Jesus, 4-2-5. Because you don't have linebackers. And don't get me wrong, Deion Jennings had a pretty solid year. He had a good year, above average. He was better
than I gave him credit for a lot of last year. I definitely agree.
So now you have him, you have Walker, Toure, Powell obviously is going to be your full-fledged starter at linebacker. So that unit just got better. The D-line, I think the interior is still a question mark. And then the defensive backs. Is Igbinosin going to step up at safety? Can Flip Dixon fill the Izzy and role? The Braswell thing I just mentioned, can Kassan Abram get back to his 2021 self? There's a lot of ifs here, and if it all happens, should be another top tier defense. Now the issue is they're going to be on the field quite a bit. It seems like.
Yeah, that's a great transition, professional podcaster transition from Richie there.
Pretty good.
All the fans, we know we have a good defense. Let's talk the offense. You can't say necessarily how they look, but I mean, we haven't added anybody on the offensive side other than Brantley, the wide receiver. So we're running out with a lot of the same players. We lost Willie Tyler to the transfer portal. We lost a few starters from last year at wide receiver. We lost all our starters last year at wide receiver, actually, all three. We have a few guys returning, but overall, what's your outlook on the offense this year?
So you kind of just hit the nail on the head on everything. If I'm going into this offseason, and let's just say it's December, I'm thinking Rutgers is going to add a lineman at the very least, wide receiver, probably 2 wide receivers, so that's 3 right there. A tight end they need. What am I missing? Lineman, wide receiver, tight end. Maybe even a quarterback just to add a little competition there.
Yeah.
But that's 5 guys I probably would have added if I'm Rutgers in the offseason. They've added 1 in Nassim Brantley, who had a knee injury in mid-November. Yep. So don't get me wrong, Nassim Brantley, numbers-wise and film-wise, looks like a solid receiver out of Western Illinois. It's a big jump from Western Illinois. especially because where was he from originally? I think he was Sacred Heart, right? If I recall.
Yeah, he spent his first 2 seasons at Sacred Heart. His third season or his fourth season, I believe, he spent at Western Illinois.
Yeah. So, wow, actually, he's played 5 seasons of college football already, so he's pretty old. He's near my age at this point. He's definitely gotten better, but he didn't put up crazy numbers at Sacred Heart either. Like his highest yardage at Sacred Heart was 400 yards. Now, I say that in with a side eye kind of because JD Dorenzo obviously came up and was the best lineman by far.
Yep.
I just don't know if Brantley's skill positions transfer that well from the NEC or whatever. Actually, I don't know what Western Illinois is in. It's a totally different conference. To the what are they in? MVVC. I don't know what the fuck that is.
Is it the Missouri Valley something conference?
Football conference? I don't know. But they finished 11th. They weren't even that good. In the transition all the way to the Big Ten, plus you're injured too. Were injured. I don't know how well that's going to work. That's why they're trying to get another guy. They obviously have a portal guy coming in on Friday, and Jaquay Jackson. I can't pronounce shit. But I've been talking to him. He's very hyped about this visit. Colorado, Cincinnati, Georgia Tech are already Power 5 offers he's received. 1,100 yards, almost 1,200, 13 touchdowns. Obviously, another big jump to go from California University of Pennsylvania Vulcans. What a fucking team name for that. Yeah, he's going to come visit this weekend. I wouldn't be shocked if he committed this weekend. And I'll tell you right now, they don't have weapons. They don't have any type of veteran experience. Well, they have veterans. They're just not experienced at the wide receiver position. I think he comes in and he's wide receiver 1 or 2 at that point. This is what they have. This is what's left of the portal. This is why you should have got a guy early. You should have got your OC in ASAP, especially since it's a guy like Kirksrock. I feel like they should have got him immediately. But I don't know. It's just he seems like a good player. He ran a 4.4 140. Mind you, is that hand times, laser times? I don't know. The other factor here is he's a Pittsburgh native out of Sarah Catholic High School. Pittsburgh offered an hour ago.
Yeah, not great. And he already had he already had a bunch of D1 Power 5 offers, including the Colorado team, which it seems like nobody says no to Dion. But
yeah, I don't know. A lot
of competition for this kid. Maybe not, but he is a D2 kid. He entered the portal on 3/24, which is last Friday. He had what was his yardage output from last year? He had 77 catches for 1178 yards and 13 touchdowns. If you watch his tape, it's just a lot of him catching the ball in space and breaking away from lower Division II DBs. He's not playing a lot of press coverage, a lot of soft, either soft man coverage or just zone. So he's not it's really tough to gauge how good this kid is. Now, will he play on Rutgers this year? Yes, because Rutgers has Brantley and Chris Long. That's really about it, and a bunch of freshmen. I think the third receiver right now is a former walk-on Christian Dremel. So they clearly need a talent infusion at wide receiver, and for Rutgers to be taking a visitor, this first week of spring practice, I think is telling. And who knows if this is something that continues. I know that there's a second transfer window that's either currently happening or set to happen in the near future. I wouldn't be surprised if Rutgers is very active in the second window of football recruiting.
Now let me touch on that a little bit because we got some tidbits from Pro Day, just talking to people and
interesting
sources. So they're going to try to get a receiver ASAP. They don't have time. You cannot wait. Other guys are getting paid, and it's clear as day. There's a lower level D1 guy that I know that just got $600K from an FBS school.
Wow.
There's another one that got 250. This. Then they don't have NIL. They don't have NIL at Rutgers. They have it, but it's not much. So it's going to be tough. I think this is your best option right now. Is this kid Jaquay Jackson? Sorry, I keep pronouncing his name wrong, but we'll figure it out one day. But that's the thing. People keep I said it on the boards, wide receiver 1 or 2 as soon as he gets here, and people are like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, Chris Long is decent, I would say, and he had 200 yards last year. Rashad Rochelle was playing running back last year, and he's probably one of your better receivers. Christian Dremel is what he is. He's a preferred walk-on that got a ship. Isaiah Washington hasn't done anything for the past 4 or 5 years, whatever he's had now. There's just no wide receivers with like legit playing experience or stats on this roster, and that's the big concern. Now, mind you, that's probably because the offensive line stinks, and you didn't have an offensive lineman. You lost your left tackle and your left guard. And your left guard. Someone asked me to make a depth chart, like pre-spring depth chart yesterday and through text, and I'm like, dude, I don't even know who the guard is. Like, they don't have a left guard.
It would be a lot of guessing because you don't know.
And the right guard isn't that good either.
Yeah, Curtis Dunlap struggled a lot. He was at his moments last year where he was basically just a turnstile, unfortunately. But I mean, they did take how many guys with freshman redshirt freshman eligibility they have on the offensive line? I believe it's somewhere around like 15.
6. Oh, overall, with them, it's like it was 6 or 7 in 2022, and then they just added 4 or 5 more. So yeah, it's pretty close to that.
Yeah, so it's a lot. And the biggest jump these guys are going to make in their college careers between their true freshman year and their either true sophomore or their redshirt freshman year. So
yeah,
there could be guys that come out of nowhere and it's like, wow, who's 74? Oh, that's player X. It's like, holy crap, he looks totally different. Like from the pictures alone that I've seen, Taj White looks totally different. He looks like he's totally transformed his body. I know Dante Chin was getting a lot of hype last year, and he was a guy that they found at the 11th hour. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of makes a jump, given that he's in his first full year of college. So there are guys who can make a jump, but you can't really rely on that. You need to have a backup plan, which I don't think
and
right now.
It doesn't help that your quarterback's not that accurate. So
yeah, so the quarterback competition, Greg was asked about it, and he said it's too early. I believe was his rough answer.
Mm-hmm.
Ask him again in a couple weeks. Obviously, Gavin started the last 4 games of last year, I believe.
Yeah.
After Evan Simon started a bunch, Gavin obviously hurt his ankle midway through the Temple game, and he didn't really play a whole lot through the middle of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Is it truly kind of is Schiano being relatively honest with that answer, or do you think that Gavin's the heavy favorite to start this year?
If I'm a betting man, it's like minus 500, minus 600 odds in favor of Gavin compared to Evan Simon's maybe like plus 250. Like maybe Evan Simon comes out and impresses. He's looked good. Last season, he looked pretty good in practice as a practice quarterback. But again, it's practice. It's not the game.
Yeah.
Comes to game time, it's totally different quarterback. So both of them. I think the best thing I could say about this offense this year in terms of play calling too, kind of segueing a little bit, is if you look at that tendencies article that Brian Moss put out a couple weeks ago, we reposted it in our spring practice hub. Rutgers ran the ball or did a run 19.5% of the time. They did a run pass 15.6% of the time. Kirk Soraka's offense last year was nearly 30% of the time was run. I hate to say it. I think that it's going to be a very similar offense to the Minnesota offense last year. Wide receivers aren't great. Lines, Running back is probably your best position by far on offense, and you're going to have to run the ball. Like, that's it.
Yeah, and Schiano touched on the running game. He said that he had 3 injury updates. The first 2 were Mo Toure and Moses Walker being full goes. Mm-hmm. And the last was Samuel Brown is still working his way back from the foot surgery he had midway through the season. Do you think he'll be a full go by the time summer comes?
Yeah, I think he can go full go now if they really wanted to, but they're just not going to push it because if you don't have him, you think the offense is bad now, take Sam Brown out and look at the last couple games of last season, and you kind of see where you're at.
So the offense is going to be run through Sam Brown, it sounds like. That shouldn't surprise anybody, but just reiterating, it'll be a heavily run-based offense, which, sign of the times. That's definitely the direction offense is going in 2023. Heavy run games, bad passing offense. So the modern game will be at Rutgers this fall. If you can't tell, I'm dripping with sarcasm right now. Hopefully that one of these quarterbacks develops into the guy we hope they could be to give us a respectable passing offense, because if we don't have that, it's just the running game's not going to work. you look at Minnesota last year, they were starting a fifth-year senior in Tanner Morgan, who's, had a 30-touchdown season. He's had a 4,000-yard passing season.
Mm-hmm. And I'd argue he's average.
Yeah, he is. But it doesn't – you don't need to have a Drake May or you don't need to have a Caleb Williams running your offense to have a respectable passing game. You just need average. If we can get to an average passing game, this team can be good. I have no doubt about that. With the defense we have, and I do like Kirk, but we might be a year or two away personnel-wise to really achieve his vision of offense. But I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, it's tough, and then the schedule's not doing you any favors really either. So
nope.
That's the tougher scenario too. I mean, Northwestern opening up it's you like to think it's a cakewalk because they went 1-11, but I would not count them out either. I don't count anyone out in the Big Ten just because they can rebuild so quickly. And it's Pat Fitzgerald at the end of the day. He's a good coach. He knows how to rebuild. He's added a couple portal guys. We'll have to just kind of wait and see. But I think the over-under right now is the same as last year for the most part. I think it's 3.5. It wouldn't shock me if it went either way, to be honest. I don't think it goes much, maybe a half over or half under. That's about it.
At the same time, though, Rutgers does open the season with 4 very winnable games. So
that's the issue. Yeah.
If this team is to make a big turnaround, you'll know by the end of September if this is going to be a team that could possibly make a bowl game. If we're 2-2 coming out of September, we're 1-3 coming out of September. Long season coming. But if we're 3-1, maybe a bit of pie in the sky, 4-0. Because Rutgers has started 3-0 the last 2 years. It's not like this is something that's totally crazy to think that they can do. It's just they have to do it again.
It's just at Michigan, Ann Arbor, Game 4.
Is it Game 4?
Yeah, Wagner's Game 5. So
okay, so I think September has 5 games. Yeah, I don't think they're going to start 4-0. I just want to circle back to that one. They're going to have to start, 3-2 or 4-1 with the schedule they have to realistically have a bowl game in their sights by the end of the season.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I forgot they play Virginia Tech this year. They're a weird program too. I don't know how to judge them too much yet. We'll get more into that obviously as the season comes closer. But spring ball also kind of stinks because you can't really see anything. You don't see much difference. It's not like training camp where guys are going full speed. It's more of relaxed. It's more like, hey, let's experiment. Let's try this guy on defense. Let's try that guy on offense. Let's see what happens here. Oh, you know what? Look, Iron Brown is a pretty good offensive center. Maybe we should just keep him there. And that's kind of, I guess, how that one happened too. But it's not a whole lot of – it's more experimenting and trying to figure out your team and learn the offense more than anything. So I wouldn't read too much into anything put out this spring.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to put it because they talk about this in spring training. I got baseball on the mind too because today's opening day.
Yes.
You might see a pitcher go out there and get shelled for 7 runs and 2 innings, but then you find out afterwards he's working on a new pitch. The entire time, his goal was to just get a better feel for this new pitch that he just started developing. So the guy might not be looking good in practice, but that's because he's trying to learn a new position. He's trying to learn a new technique from a new coach. So I think this is a time to fail. You want to fail in spring practice so you can succeed in games in the fall. So it's especially tough.
So now that being said, Garrett Cole, don't fucking try anything stupid. Just pitch the game, win the game, and get out. That's it.
Yeah. Is there anything else football related before we bring on Richard?
Recruiting wise, no. We are close to submitting a future cast.
Do you want to give any more information on that?
Caden Brown.
Caden Brown.
Yeah, we're close to it. It sounds like he's still favoring Rutgers quite a bit. We'll kind of wait and see what happens there. If they land him, there's a good shot they land, I want to say at least 1 or 2 other New York kids. I think Aris Basia will probably follow him if he comes to Rutgers. I think Corey Duff will definitely follow him if he comes to Rutgers. The one that I'm still kind of iffy on is Josiah Brown. I know people are going to be upset about that. So with the good, there's bad. I'm trying to level you guys off and status quo. But yeah, so he's getting pursued by every school in the world, Josiah. So it's going to be a real tough one there. But we'll wait and see. It sounds like Caden will be back on campus soon. I don't know exact dates. Wouldn't shock me if he showed up to the spring game. I know we put together a little spring game, or not even spring, just spring recruit visitors already. It's been a bunch of new names, a couple guys. And then not tomorrow. What's the first? Saturday, we'll have our new crystal ball, which I'm trying to do this once a month now, where I try to project the future of the recruiting class. So instead of just doing one prediction where we go like, 23 and 23, like let's just take our best guesses. We're going to do this every month to try to figure it out of what this recruiting class is going to look like. Obviously, there's already a couple commitments in Kenny Jones, Winovich, AJ Serace, obviously. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting little article, and you guys are going to see some names you probably haven't heard before, and some names that you're like, oh wow, if he ends up at Rutgers, it's great. Like, so.
I like it. So a new feature coming out soon for anybody who's a member on the boards. So thanks again for joining us. We're going to be transitioning now. Oh, you got something else?
Wait, I forgot. I got to give a shout out to KYK's girlfriend for writing the funniest thing I think I've ever seen. Maybe not ever seen. I've seen some funny things. One of the funnier things on social media ever. I got to pull this up. So she wrote, basically, to give you guys context, if you're not on Twitter, at KYK1827 or at Rutgers Rivals, we retweeted it. His girlfriend wrote him a letter from Pat Hobbs.
And the letter was telling him that his season tickets have been canceled due to some of the inflammatory things he said on the Knight Report. And apparently it was an early April Fool's joke and got him pretty good, and he posted it online, and it is really funny. Yeah,
it is hilarious. We're trying to figure out here if this is a Pat Hobbs signature or not. She might have just photocopied it. Like, it looks pretty legit to me.
Yeah, we'll attach that to the post here, so if you're listening, you can actually see it.
Yeah.
But so that's all for football. Let's transition now. We're going to bring on Richard Kent, the Rutgers basketball insider. So stay tuned. We'll be back in a second. And we want to welcome back Richard Kent to the show. His second appearance now in the last couple weeks. It sounds like somebody caught the podcast bug a little bit. We have a lot to go over for the basketball program, but once again, thanks for coming on, Richard.
Great. I really appreciate it.
Sounds like there was a lot of buzz around your last appearance, so we want to just kind of hop right into it. We heard about Coach Carl Hobbs getting interviews elsewhere, but it sounds like Coach Brandon Knight is also getting a little bit of interest from Valparaiso, which is out near the Pittsburgh area where he went to college. What are you hearing there?
Yeah, he was definitely interviewed at Valpo. I mean, he's making $600,000 at Rutgers. Valpo paid their last coach $435,000. So, I don't know if he's really interested in it. It may be a situation in which it's always valuable to garner, interview experience for future positions. Enough people have told me that he wants to be and feels he is ready to be a Power 5 coach or a Power 6 coach, let's say.
Now, do you think he kind of holds out for one of those Power 6 jobs, or is it a situation where maybe Valpo pays a little less, but it's still a head coaching job at the end of the day?
My hunch is, and it's purely a hunch, nothing inside, that even if he was offered it, he wouldn't take it. I mean, if you're offered a Bradley or a Dayton, maybe you have to think twice about that. I don't think he was involved. I'm certain he was not involved in the Penn State situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and plus from what I've heard, he's very close with the Valpo athletic director, so it makes sense for him to interview there regardless. But yeah, if they paid their last coach in the $400,000 range, and Rutgers is paying him $600,000, and I believe it goes up to $625,000 next year according to his contract. I can't imagine him leaving for less money.
Right.
And plus, it would be a brutal blow to recruiting too, because he has those connections down in Georgia. That's the main reason we landed Ace Bailey for. Relationship-wise, and he's also very close to the Harpers, so it wouldn't be great to lose him from the recruiting front.
Yeah, he's definitely the lead guy for Ace Bailey. TJ is the lead guy for the New England Preps, and Carl Hobbs is involved there as well. And, I mean, that has been a priority for Rutgers ever since TJ was brought on from GW.
And you mentioned New England Preps, so let's jump right into that. You helped run the Schoolboy Classic, which was this past weekend, which Rutgers commit Gavin Griffiths was a part of. Got football in the brain. You won the MVP of that game. What did you hear from that event, and how did Gavin look?
Well, I didn't hear much. I was there.
Yeah.
I co-run the event. It's the oldest continuous high school all-star game in the country, and Steve Peichel played in it in 87 or 86, and Steve's sister played in it as well. I was able to develop a really good relationship with Gavin's dad, who played against Steve. As we know, he played at Hartford. He never played in the Schoolboy Classic. I saw Gavin at practice on Wednesday evening, and obviously for the game. He's a terrific long-range sniper for sure. He has great range, Steph Curry type range, sees the floor very well, is a very bright player, needs to gain some weight. The same thing I said about Derek Simpson when he played in the game last year. And by the way, Derek Simpson was a revelation last year in the game. I mean, I got to tell you, I did expect Gavin to be good, maybe not 26 points good and win the MVP, but Derek was just a revelation. So they've played in the game back-to-back. Little doubt in my mind that Gavin does start. Does he start on the first game? I guess he does, especially, when we have a situation with a player coming back from the knee injury. And I would slot him in, and I think he's going to thrive. I think he's going to be a 24 to 26 minute guy. I think the summer trip to Europe and to Africa is going to help him integrate into the team.
Now, give us some context. What other players, in terms of commitments, like high-level prospects, were in the game? We know Papa Conte was in it, who's a Michigan signee. Who else played in the game?
Yeah, it was not it's Connecticut against New Jersey. Last year we had Mark Armstrong from New Jersey and Donovan Clingan from Connecticut. It was not a great Jersey roster. There's a kid going to Army. There's a kid going to Yale to play football. The Connecticut team overwhelmed the New Jersey team. There's a Connecticut player going to Amherst, and there's a few players, both Connecticut and New Jersey, who are going to prep next year at schools like St. Thomas More. So, the big names were Papa and Gavin. And by the way, I've been told it's the first formal game that they ever played together. And they are best buddies. And, they live together for a long period of time. And you could see the glee in Gavin's face, when there was an assist to Papa.
Yeah, it's a shame that they're not going to be playing together in college, but you got to make your own best decisions. It sounds like Rutgers was a close second in that recruitment.
Yeah, I asked Papa, and he smiled, and he said, it's Michigan. So, I mean, that's what he felt.
That's fair.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, moving on to Rutgers roster, there's obviously a lot of moves that are still to be determined. Paul Mulcahy's the one I think everyone kind of wants to know about. Are you hearing anything? Is he staying? Is he going? Obviously, he has that extra COVID year that he could come back. So,
2 weeks ago, I heard that he was probably gone and was going to, get going with his life. He's got a girlfriend who he's been dating since high school, who's around here, and he's the leader in the clubhouse for sure. He's the spiritual voice of the team. If I had to guess today, I would say 60-40 that he comes back.
Wow, a lot of change in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. I think Steve doesn't like his kids to read social media stuff, but Paul, we've heard enough stuff about Paul reading it, and there was some really brutal and really unjustified social media stuff at the end of the season. Did Paul have the greatest last 5 games of his career? Of course not. But, the type of stuff that was written about him was unfair. And, that could have influenced him a little bit a couple of weeks ago. But I think you can get over stuff like that.
Yeah, but I did think Paul looked pretty good as a knockdown shooter when Derek Simpson became like the true point guard of the offense. I do think there can be a role for him, like a huge role for him coming in the next season, just not as the point guard anymore.
I mean, there can be, but you've got, you've got 2 really good shooters now. So, where does that leave him? I don't doubt that he can shoot it, but you've got two great shooters on the team. A luxury that Rutgers has not had for years and years.
Yeah, no, it definitely gives you a different feel for the offense, especially if Paul comes back. You have Derek, like you mentioned, then Gavin, Cam, and then we don't even know what Cliff's going to do yet.
Yeah.
Listen, I've heard anecdotally, I can't give you any specifics, that there's people out there trying to poach him, especially from the SEC.
Yeah, they don't cheat.
Right, they don't cheat, and those NIL numbers are crazy. I mean, segueing a little bit over to Tyler Betsy, who's at St. Thomas More. I mean, I had one person tell me that his NIL number is going to be over $1 million.
Jeez.
So that
doesn't surprise me. That seems to be the running rate for a 5-star prospect.
Yeah, that's not going to happen at Rutgers, obviously.
Yeah. I guess not. But so we kind of touched on scheduling a bit earlier. Let's talk about next year. We had heard rumors in the Jerry Carino article that Rutgers was looking to an MTE event in the Bahamas. And also there's a rumored MSG neutral site game. What can you tell us about both those scheduling situations?
Well, the good news is there will be an MTE. I think the bad news is it won't be in the Bahamas.
I was really looking forward to that pre-Thanksgiving warm weather trip to watch some Rutgers basketball, but what are you hearing?
Yeah, I'm hearing the MTE will be similar to the MTE that took place at the RAC this past year, in that Rutgers has put out some feelers, perhaps for the Bahamas, but more likely if it happens in 2024. One of the big benefits of the Bahamas is NIL money that can go to foreign students, but that can be accomplished with the trip to Europe and the trip to Africa. So I don't see those two games taking place at the Bahamar, which is something that was speculated as well. There is an opening there. K-State and Providence are in that event, in Miami as well, actually. But I'd be really surprised if Rutgers is in it.
So given that there is an opening, what is the main holdup of Rutgers actually taking the spot?
The spot in the Bahamas?
Yes.
I don't know the answer to that question. I guess the staff has decided that that may not be beneficial. You've got those are two Power 5 games. You've got Seton Hall on the road. You've got Wake Forest on the road. Inevitably, this could be the last Gavitt games, by the way, but there will be Gavitt games this year, and Rutgers can't possibly get dealt DePaul again. So
I sure hope not.
Right, and they've played Miami 300 times already. So you would think that Rutgers might get a local, might get a St. John's or a UConn, and there's talk about Rutgers also playing St. John's at Madison Square Garden. And by the way, this is going to be a way different St. John's team than the team we saw for the last 5 years, the team that Montez Mathis transferred to.
Yeah, it sounds like Soriano's sticking around and everyone else is going to be gone, or at least Pitino's doing his best to push out everyone else.
Yeah.
Well, he anointed Soriano, I think, unknown to Soriano as the captain at his introductory press conference. There's no doubt that he's trying to get Walter Clayton Jr., who played at Iona, who's a really good player. And he's in it for that Timberlake kid. He's in it from Ledlam, from Harvard, who's a really good player. I saw him play about 10 times. He's a stud. And there were rumors that he was in it for a New York City kid, but I think the kid is going to Kentucky. But he's going to get a bunch of studs for sure.
Now, he keeps talking about playing every college game at the Garden in, what he's tweeting out. Do you think that they play more than 50% of their games at the Garden this year?
Well, we've got to segregate out the non-conference from the conference.
Yeah.
And they only played, unbelievably, 4 Big East games at Madison Square Garden, and one of them was taken over by UConn, in which I was told that it was 80-20, believe it or not, UConn fans. I think that he's going to play every Big East game at Madison Square Garden, and if he gets a marquee out-of-conference game, or listen, let's call Rutgers a marquee out-of-conference game, it'll be at Madison Square Garden.
That can't count as a neutral site game if Rutgers plays against a team playing half their games at their home court, right? Like, they're not going to screw us again.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. If it's part of a doubleheader in which Rutgers gets to control 25 or 50% of the gate, I don't know what the answer is to that. But if Rutgers played St. John's at Madison Square Garden on a Saturday at noon in December and the tickets were parceled out evenly, it would probably be a pro St. John's crowd, but it would be very close.
Yeah. No, I mean, we all saw it with the takeover against Michigan State. That was 95% Rutgers fans, 14,000 plus of a 16,000 seat arena. That was huge for a Saturday at 12 o'clock.
But I know some of the Garden people, and they noticed that, believe me. And also, St. John's noticed that because their next game, I think, was against Georgetown, and they drew 9,000.
Wow.
Wow.
Pretty awful matchup in general. Georgetown, I think, they won like one Big East game the last few years, the last 3 or 4 years combined. So
yeah, that's going to
exactly
change
a premier opponent. Yeah, that will. Cooley's a great coach, and he's already got a few Providence commits signed on with Georgetown, and I'm sure he'll bring in a nice collection of transfer portal guys too.
I know that a lot of people, especially on the Rutgers board, like to postulate that the Big East is finished. The Big East is not finished.
Far from it.
And I've already seen, not that it matters, but I've already seen a Mike DeCourcy top 20 for next year. He's got UConn 1, he's got Xavier 5, and I think he's got Creighton like 15. I mean, the Big East 1 through 5, and maybe when you throw in St. John's, is going to be tremendous next year.
Yeah, so I want to touch on – I'll go on, Mike. My bad.
No, I was just saying they're loaded.
Yeah, so I want to touch on that a little bit with St. John's. Rutgers has had the luxury of not having a good St. John's team down the road. How much will Pitino being there kind of affect recruiting and affect Rutgers in general?
I haven't seen Rutgers St. John's head-to-head for a player. I don't even know. I know that UConn was heavily involved with Montez Mathis when Steve got him. I don't know if St. John's was involved then. I really don't think it's going to have a great impact. And I have a different spin on it. I think a good East is good for everybody in the East because I think you've got eyeballs back on Eastern basketball. And I think that's helpful. Now, I know a lot of Rutgers fans say we're not in the East, we're in the Big Ten. But I got news for you. Rutgers is in the East. And I don't know that a lot of local kids go to Rutgers because Rutgers is in the Big Ten. I think a lot of local kids go to Rutgers because Rutgers is really doing well right now. It's got the Barnabas Athletic Performance Center. And if you go to a game at the RAC, there's a palpable buzz. So the real answer to your question is, I guess theoretically it could hurt on one recruit, maybe over a 2 or 3 year span, but I don't think it's going to hurt Rutgers.
So you mentioned the summer trip to Africa and how that's going to help us with NIL for our international players. Where are you hearing that they're going to actually go for that trip? And can you explain why that would help for our international players, the NIL? We all know it, but just explain it to our listeners.
Yeah, well, they're going to Portugal, and I'm not sure which African country. I've heard a couple, but they're definitely going to an African country. And you're allowed to pay a kid who's on a student visa in the United States on foreign soil. So that's the front runner for that was Oscar Tshiebwe when Kentucky made a trip to the Bahamas in August. This last August. So any foreign kid on Rutgers or any school for that matter can get paid when they're playing on foreign soil. And I think Rutgers also wants to recruit in Africa. And listen, we know that Rutgers has a kid coming in from Africa.
Yep.
From the preps in New England, and he's a really good player. And I've had other coaches who recruited him tell me that, by January or so, he's going to probably be a 20-plus minute player, Ndongo.
Yeah, plus Mawat Mag was born in Sudan. Obviously, Cliff is from Nigeria. Rutgers has done a really good job. Bay Fall, they were in it till the end, who's an African kid who ended up at Arkansas. They're recruiting really well, kids who were originally from Africa. So it's be a huge recruiting trip for the entire team, but also for potentially kids 3, 4, 5 years down the road that they can talk to.
Absolutely.
So Rutgers has had a few kids transfer out in the last few weeks. Dean Reber, Oscar Palmquist, and Jalen Miller. Let's start with Jalen Miller. Where are you hearing he's getting the most interest from schools in the transfer portal?
Well, I actually got a text from a Penn guy this morning. Penn is interested in him. Cornell is interested in him. And some of the MAC schools are interested in him. I think the biggest shocker that I heard is that on day one, Dean Reber was offered $70,000 by a mid-major in the Midwest.
That goes to show how crazy NIL is, and for a guy who barely played this year to get an offer of high 5 figures, wow.
Yeah, both he and Oscar on day one had more than 10. I think actually the number with Reber was 17 offers.
Wow.
Jeez.
Where do you hear that Reber's leaning right now?
I don't think he's leaning anywhere. I do know that Fairfield, Jay Young, obviously at Fairfield, is interested in getting at least one of them. His offense, to a large extent this year, was predicated on the three-point shot. He had a lefty, interestingly, a lefty named T.J. Long. I think Oscar is actually more skilled than that kid. So, and this is a hunch. I know he's interested in both, but my hunch is that Oscar would fit in the system well.
Interesting.
I know last we talked to you mentioned about, or maybe it wasn't you, it was someone, I forget who said it, that Palmquist was thinking about just giving up college hoops completely. Is that still in the cards? Because I know he wants to go back to Sweden. The national team's kind of reaching out a little bit.
I think he's playing next year in college.
Okay. Interesting.
So have you heard of any Rutgers players currently that schools are trying to poach away?
I don't know how well sourced it is, but the obvious one, and I have heard it, is Cliff.
And Cliff, you said that SEC schools are reaching out, and do you ultimately see him coming back to college and coming back to Rutgers specifically?
I do see him coming back to college, and I would be stunned if he didn't come back to Rutgers. He's got a really close relationship with Steve and the staff. I know that he's really happy at Rutgers, and I would think it would have to be a big number that would lure him away.
Definitely, and I imagine the NIL trip in the summer will hopefully help lock him back in if he's coming back to college. So
it would help lock him in, but you got to remember you're capped by virtue of how much NIL money you have, and I mean I have a general idea, which I'd prefer not to say right now, how much NIL money Rutgers has for basketball. Nowhere near what you mentioned Arkansas, what an Arkansas would have.
Yeah, doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, it sounds like Arkansas is kind of the Texas A&M of college basketball.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, they're just stockpiling.
Yeah,
and Musselman's also a great coach too.
Yeah, all that to lose.
I mean, They made 2 Elite Eights in the last 3 years. They had a Sweet 16 this year. They're a great program, man.
They lost. That's all that matters.
Yep, yeah. They did lose. Well, listen, we're talking about NIL, and people forget. I think one of the great performances Rutgers had this year on the road was at Miami.
True.
You kidding? That was early, and then it kind of got buried, and people aren't talking about it. But I mean, Rutgers was in that game until the last minute, and we know how good Miami is. We know how good Jim Larrañaga is, and it's a Miami team, and I don't think it's going to happen. But it's a Miami team that some are picking to beat UConn. And by the way, I think the winner of that game is going to win the national championship.
I totally agree. I think you're dead on there. And Rutgers was playing down a man too. Paul Mulcahy wasn't in that game. I think Caleb McConnell also missed that game. No, he played, but that was him. Yeah. I think that was one of his first games back. And Rutgers was winning that game for a large part of it. Like, they were winning for most of the second half, and they just kind of fell apart. But yeah, that was a great performance and looks even better in hindsight.
Yeah, no doubt.
So we touched on some coaching rumors and coaching topics earlier. I want to kind of round those off. Carl Hobbs obviously interviewed with a couple schools. He interviewed with Manhattan. He interviewed with Temple. What are you hearing with his status, and is he going to continue to interview, or do you think this is kind of it for him? He's going to stick around?
Yeah, there's not a lot left right now. He'll be back for sure. I mean, the rumors that you heard are certainly accurate. How about John Gallagher resurrecting himself, bringing a lawsuit against the University of Hartford, and still ending up on his feet? By the way, he's a good coach.
Yeah, it seems like he kind of got screwed by Hartford with the whole like D1, D3 thing.
Yeah, I would also, going back, I would look at Manhattan and Iona with new coaches as two schools that might take a look at Miller, Palmquist, and Reber.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
It sounded like Brett McConnell was in the driver's seat for the Army job, and that obviously went to another coach. What are you hearing regarding former Rutgers alumni Brett McConnell and his coaching future?
Brett could have had the Army job if he wanted it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, he could have had Army and New Hampshire. Brett was highly sought after. Unfortunately, NJIT did not seek him out. I think that Grant Billmeyer is going to get that job. I've been told that. But
huge.
Brett is a hot commodity, and he will be hot again next year. I would have loved to have seen him on the Rutgers staff. He interviewed a couple years back. He had an opportunity, but he was not chosen. He will be a head coach, or I guess I could say a high major assistant or a head coach. But I think a head coach. I think Columbia is probably going to open next year. Lafayette, unfortunately, opened for a minute and then it got filled. I know that was a job that he would have been interested in, but Brett will get a job.
Let me put this on. Sometimes we put our tinfoil hats on here.
Oh, God.
So if Carl Hobbs ends up getting a head coaching job this offseason, is it possible Brett McConnell comes on to fill that assistant coach role?
I do think
at
so.
Rutgers.
I do think so. Yeah, I would think. I mean, listen, I would think that he'd be a presumptive favorite to fill that. I mean, he's a Rutgers grad. We know the role that his dad plays at the school. We know the close relationship that he has with Greg Schiano. We know that he had a really good interview with Steve Peichel when he interviewed, and we know that he's a tremendous recruiter. He's the guy that brought in Tosan Awoma. You might have seen this morning that Tosan declared for the NBA draft.
Tosan signed with an agent too.
Sorry?
He signed with an agent too, so he's in.
Yep. Yeah, Tosan would have been, and this is no hyperbole, the biggest NIL portal guy in the last 2 years if he had stayed in the portal. Everybody wanted him. I mean, I'm going to speculate in the $2 to $5 million range.
Jeez.
Wow, that's Caleb Williams money. Wow.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to take this off.
Just imagine like McConnell and Knight on the same coaching staff too.
Man,
like what Rutgers could probably do.
Be incredible.
You can't dismiss TJ Thompson.
TJ too, yeah,
as a recruiter, because he cut his teeth on. I'm going to say it again, on the New England Preps.
Yeah. Now, are you hearing anything else in regards to Rutgers in the transfer portal? I know it's been relatively quiet. I know they've shown interest in players, but it seems like most of these guys are getting NIL elsewhere. Yeah,
I have not. I thought the last time that I was on, that Timberlake kid from Towson was pretty close to Rutgers. Patino has, I've been told, has made him an offer. I don't know what NIL looks like at St. John's. Well, actually, I do. A year ago today, NIL looked awful at St. John's. Way worse. Way worse than today. But does Patino, and Patino's got a relationship, with that really rich vitamin water alumnus from St. John's. So does the NIL terrain and landscape at St. John's change appreciably? I would say it does.
I 100% agree. They've just been dying for anything to to get them excited again for St. John's basketball. And I mean, Rick Pitino certainly does that. He brought so much energy. He's the type of coach they probably would have loved to have for the last 30 years, let alone, right now. I mean, he is a little bit older, but he's still got, 5 to 10 years left in him, I feel like, even though as long as he can keep his nose relatively clean, that is.
And he's going to shoot the three. We know he's going to shoot the three. And, he really changed everything at Providence with Billy Donovan when he shot the three and more than 50% of the time and took them to the Final Four. We do know how important the three is, obviously more important than the two, more important than the long-range two, and no less than Pete Carrill and Rick Pitino have advocated it over everything. Pete Carrill actually is on record as saying there's only 2 shots in college basketball, the layup and the three.
Yeah, and he was saying that, decades ago, and look at the NBA now. That's all the NBA is: dunks, layups, and three-pointers. So,
well, he influenced the NBA by being at Sacramento. He was under Eddie Jordan, and the reason he was at Sacramento was because of his relationship with Jeff Petrie, who was one of his star players on the 67 and 68 teams, was NBA co-rookie of the year with Dave Cowens, and was a general manager at Sacramento and hired him. And he changed that was the golden era of Sacramento when he was there.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think that this is the first time this year in 16 years that Sacramento's made the playoffs, which, when half the league makes the playoffs, to miss it 16 straight years is just incredible. It's just more difficult than anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we've run through a lot of topics. Was there anything you wanted to touch on that we haven't asked you yet, Richard?
How about a non-Rutgers basketball? I've been looking forward to that UConn-Rutgers baseball series for about a year when it was announced. I know Jimmy Penders a little. He's the head coach at UConn, and he really respects Steve Owens and respects Rutgers. And a lot of my buddies, actually 3 of my closest friends, are huge UConn baseball fans, and so we had side bets on it. Unfortunately, Rutgers got swept. But I think it's important for RPI purposes and important for baseball in the East that they play. And I'm relatively certain that it's going to be a return trip to Piscataway next year.
That's great to hear.
That's
huge. It was a respectable sweep, though. I think Rutgers was leading in 2 of the 3 games. I think all 3 games were decided by 1 or 2 runs. Like, they were in every one of those games. It's just they happened to lose them close.
Yeah, believe it or not, I wanted to go to it, but I went to MSG for the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games. But I watched the doubleheader on. It's not our vision; it's the analog of that at UConn Vision. And yeah, Rutgers did play great. I'm not a huge. I want to get into it more, but I do know that Rutgers seems to be missing a closer this year, which Rutgers had last year.
Yeah, yep. But I mean, they're producing MLB talent every year, and back when I was going to Rutgers, there was like one Major League Baseball prospect on each team, like each cycle, and now there's 3 or 4 each class for the draft class. So it's an exciting time to be a Rutgers sports fan in general, especially if you're a baseball fan. That Max Martin kid now has 3 straight games with a home run. They had a huge comeback yesterday. They were down 7-0 and ended up winning 9-7. So it's a fun team to watch. They're never out of these games.
Did they play Tennessee or did they play NJIT?
They played NJIT.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so here, quick trivia question. What former Rutgers catcher caught a no-hitter?
In professional baseball?
In professional baseball. Jeff Torborg caught a Sandy Koufax no-hitter.
Wow.
Shit.
Actually, it might have been a perfect game. Now that I think about it,
I did not know that.
It might have been a perfect game.
Wasn't he the Rutgers manager as well at one point?
I don't believe that he was. No, he's been a huge
maybe I'm mistaken.
Rutgers baseball donor.
Okay. Wow, that's dropping trivia on here as well. You come for the podcast, stay for the trivia.
Yeah.
All right, Richard. Well, if we have touched on everything, we want to thank you once again. We'll have you back on basically whenever you want to come on. But thanks again for joining us. And this has been another edition of the Knight Report podcast. Signing off.